Meeting of the Monterey Select Board at 5 p.m. Justin Maycook here, President Town Hall.
Susan Cooper, President Town Hall.
We don't have Scott at the moment, but he may arrive shortly. So the first item of old business, we'll get started and see if Scott comes, but the first item is the special town meeting warrant. A couple questions other than, well, there's more than not. So I think one thing is I asked Donna reviewed it.
Okay. This is the current version, correct?
Yes, so Donna more or less said everything is good. If you'll notice, there's a new Article 4, which we have not discussed before, but it is, are you familiar with the truck issue?
No, somehow.
So, in May, we approved, I think it was $160,000 of a loan to purchase an outfit, F-550 truck.
Okay.
And I've since learned that that particular Ford vehicle is hard to purchase. And the Director of Operations and the Town Administrator recommended that we make the wording more flexible to purchase essentially the same vehicle, but not necessarily a Ford F-550.
Right.
We do have to go back to town meeting because town meeting had voted
For a 550.
a very specific truck.
Exactly.
Donna said that's the appropriate wording.
Okay.
The other, I'll just read her response since we're waiting for
Right.
Scott. Other than that, the three articles we've discussed before and the Finance Committee voted last night and approved all of them.
Okay, great.
I tried to get them to pre-approve the Parks one, just in case you did add it for the ball field, but they wouldn't do it.
Okay.
Just so you know.
Do we yet have an actual estimate? For the parks?
No, I said just finally got in touch with the former public works guy from Barrington. He sent me some names of people that he used. It was just today that I got that, so.
So this is what Donna.
I did put it in your packet, but I think it's attached to the warrant if you're looking for.
Oh, yeah, here it is. So the way we've worded it is very typical for how we've done it in Monterey, as far as I'm aware. So vote to transfer from free cash the sum of, or any other sum to pay for. Donna said something for you to consider. The article is only to put town voters on notice of the subject matter to be addressed at town meeting and need not be verbatim what the motion will be. I recommend flexibility in the wording of warrant articles to prevent a situation where the moderator calls a motion should be beyond the four corners of the article and rules it out of order. For that reason, I recommend that the article read to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate or transfer from available funds rather than specifying free cash. The motion on town meeting floor would still have to specify that the funding is from free cash. I do prefer that we mention where it's coming from, free cash, in this case, both because I think it's more transparent and direct, straightforward, and also because I'm aware that the moderator has previously entertained motions to take from free cash, motion, change it to stabilization or vice versa.
It's worked before, so there's no reason to assume it won't work now.
Yeah, I did ask the moderator and it sounds like he, in the past, he has not ruled motions like that outside of this scope. I think we've discussed and talked about the town meeting warrant briefly before that. Moderators are just different and some moderators might not allow that, but.
But this one's working, so let's not fix it. One tiny little thing, free cash is capitalized in Article 1 and 2, but not 3. Can you make them consistent?
And then the other item which we discussed, and I just wanna verify, is if we're holding it in the firehouse's pavilion.
I think that, it's gonna be chilly, but I still think it's better, like, I can't speak for you, but, my husband is now dealing with several cases of COVID in his classes. Every group I know has been having issues. I think there will be people who won't come if it's indoors, and that would be better off pulling it outdoors. We don't wanna have a special town meeting that ends up being a spreading event, like that would be a bummer. So I think it's a little safer to do it outside, and I'd be in favor of that, but I'm entertaining other options.
It has been typical the last couple of years to hold it in the pavilion.
Well,
It is
previous to COVID anyway.
Well, previous to COVID, it was usually in the fire station.
Oh, in the pavilion, you're right, I thought you said in the pavilion.
So,
Great.
but, yeah, I mean, it's on one side, you risk it being a cold day, it is at 1:30, which should be about as warm as it will get. So we just need to make that call, I'm fine with it being.
I think it's a short, I don't really see these being particularly contentious, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, and there'll be a big fight over changing the wording of the fire truck or whatever, but, or, it's not even a fire truck, is it? No, it's an F-550. I don't see it being likely to be contentious, so if it doesn't take us hours, even if it's outside, it's gonna be okay.
Okay, so why don't we go with pavilion, so, I don't know if we've typically worded that, Melissa, but something like to meet in the pavilion behind the firehouse or something.
Yeah.
And we'll keep the 1:30 o'clock in the afternoon,
Saturday, October.
and then the free cash we're capitalizing.
Yeah.
But other than that,
Okay.
it would be good to have, we'll probably wait for Scott to
Finalize.
finalize this.
Okay.
Which brings up the lack of controversial issues.
Uh-oh.
Do we want Donna to be present in person? Do we want her to be on the phone? Do we feel like her presence, I revisited our terms of engagement with her, and I thought it might have included coming to town meetings, I don't think that it does.
I thought she did say for annual town meeting for sure, I don't know where a special town meeting would fall though.
I didn't, at least in the offer letter, I didn't see anything about ever not charging it the hourly rate. So the point being, if we call her in, and the meeting's a half hour or an hour, it's an hour, whatever it may be. If we request her to be there in person, I'm sure that she'd be obliged or send someone else from the firm.
I mean, I feel like, given what's on the warrant, I feel like the most we would need would be able to consult with her by phone, but
Yeah.
it's not, this is in fact my first rodeo, so.
I don't think
I will
that,
stand by your thoughts. on
yeah, I
this.
don't think that she needs to come in person. I think if there was a bylaw change or something like that, it's a few money articles.
And they're all sort of, not standard, but standard in the sense of, not that unusual for a town to have, or even our town to have. We were just
I hope you
discussing,
started.
we did,
Thank
we were just
Don't ever
discussing
wait for me.
whether, we needed to have town council physically present by phone or not present at
Or-
the special town meeting.
I always thought that we had town council there all the time, didn't we?
When town council was local, we did.
Well, Jeremia wasn't well. Where's our town council?
Wells. So, and I think the point being, at least my sense was that these issues are fairly non-controversial, and the most we would need is available by phone. But I did wanna run that, see if we wanted her to be there. It would just be the travel time and the time of the meeting. If we call her in on the phone, it will just be the time of the meeting that we're billed for.
Yeah. Phone.
Okay.
Why
Well,
if you
that's a
don't-
consensus, we'll have counseling by phone.
And we also were, firehouse or pavilion, I was putting forth that since there have been a bunch of cases of COVID, the pavilion, I think, is a better choice. there'll be less potential spread, more people will feel comfortable, and it's gonna be a short meeting, so I don't think anyone's gonna freeze to death at 1:30 in the afternoon. That was my thought.
Yeah, I don't know if it takes, does it really matter?
Well, we just have to make the decision, so I think Susan
That's
and I
what I'm
were,
saying, I mean,
Susan and I were on the pavilion second,
yeah.
so we'll put it in the
We
pavilion.
just didn't wanna
Yeah.
decide without you, since you're here
Well,
And-
Okay.
you should decide without me,
now. Okay.
because if I'm not here, I'm not
So
here.
noted.
And the
Okay.
last thing, just to update you, the only new article you'll see on here, Scott, is Article 4. We voted at annual town meeting to purchase a 550 truck, and Jim, the director of operations, is saying that it's hard to purchase a Ford, and that he can probably much more easily purchase a similar vehicle of another model. We have
Same price.
So it's not changing the money at all, it's just changing the wording, because that wording at annual town meeting is very specific.
Yeah, they usually are, and I'm not certain if that needs to stay.
That's
That
kind
point
of,
specific where you're tied into that manufacturer.
Right.
I would say we're
or
looking for-
model, or anything.
Right, we're looking for a vehicle of this price.
Yeah.
That fits our needs.
Exactly.
I think some open.
Of this price or less.
Assume so, if that's the truck that came along.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna try and lighten the load on that.
So,
Okay.
with those changes, it being in the pavilion rather than in the firehouse, the capitalization on Article 3 of free cash. And that's the only
That's it,
changes,
Yeah, just have to fill in the day of September 8th.
yes.
Do we wanna add that the select board supports approving this article as well?
Let's go article by article, so does the select board, support Article,
I support them all.
I
Scott
do too.
supports them all?
I support them all,
Um,
including Article 4.
yeah, the only article, I don't necessarily support Article 2, just because I was on the board when we hired Jeremiah, and I think if he had said what it was going to cost, that I might not have voted, to hire him, because Hume was likely going to appeal the case anyways.
Okay.
But we could write, the select board supports approving this article 2-1.
We could, although.
And we
even
can
if
always
I
strike
mean,
it at the meeting, if that letter that, she drafted today, he
Bears
responds to
fruit,
prior to, yeah.
But, I mean, here's the thing, even if he reduces it, we still have to pay him, and we still don't, you're saying we just use the 2,500 and that's it?
It's tricky because the high end of his estimate included more than the 2,500. But we also were expecting more, at least I was under the impression we were going to be billed for more before the end of last fiscal year.
Mhm.
Although we weren't very explicit with him on that. But I mean, there was a number of things, as you'll see in Donna's letter, we were offered a $30 rate for staff.
I saw that.
Yeah.
But even if he reduces it, so let's assume he reduces it, if he doesn't reduce it to, what would he have to reduce it to for us to fit it within the current legal budget, which is $2,500, right? We only have $2,500 left.
Yes.
Right, and that would wipe us out for the rest of the year, and including, we wouldn't even have the money for the deductible for the suit that we were served with today. So,
Well, so one question about the deductible, Melissa, I know we talked about it on Monday.
Yeah, she didn't answer me yet.
We don't know if we pay the deductible soon or towards the conclusion
right,
of a suit.
true,
Um,
but so I'm just trying to, I get that we're not sure of the amount, and I'm totally with
Yeah.
reducing the amount. I just don't wanna see us zeroed out at this point in the year for litigation. I mean, I'm assuming we're gonna owe him something, and I'm concerned that if we don't support that, what do we do? What would be the plan? If we didn't have this on there, or if it didn't get passed, what would we do?
so Donna's letter to Green and Hafer worked well enough that, as far as I know, we never heard back.
Right.
We just said, that's the money we have allotted. It was a different
Mm-hmm.
situation, but like I said, I feel like if we knew when we hired Jeremiah to take that on, what it was going to cost,
You want to say no?
I don't know that I would have voted to hire him, and my vote to hire him was necessary. So
But
I'm
we
kinda
did-
displeased.
the thing
I
is,
don't
you-
know.
Yeah, I don't blame you for being displeased, but you did hire him. And once you contract with someone, all I'm saying is, I'm hoping the bill gets reduced. And I could see that if that does happen, we could just say the article is no longer necessary. But I wanna imagine the scenario where what we get back from him is less than the current estimate, but still more than we have. What would you envision doing? If we,
well, we'd have to raise the money to fight the bill. But I'm opposed to the town, being quoted at something and then being charged more than double without, an update.
right,
That's,
I don't just,
But by appropriating the funds, doesn't insinuate that we're gonna pay that amount.
exactly.
no, it doesn't.
Or, so your point is valid, that, we're fighting this, but we also have to be smart enough to know that if we lose it, we need the money between now and annual.
And I hate to call a special town meeting for that.
Oh, no, you can't do another one.
Well,
I kinda like what you had said, 2-1.
Okay,
so we'll put,
Because we still have time before the actual meeting, that if he responds with a lower bill.
Okay.
Then everything is better, then we can adopt the dollar value down.
Yeah.
And certainly.
that would be
go
great.
up.
So-
I'm hoping for it.
so the, and I think all the finance committee votes were 3-0. So why don't we just do, on everything, the finance committee supports approving this article 3-0. And then for Article 2, the select board supports approving this article 2-1. And then we'll,
That may just
That's
open
what
up,
changes.
for conversation at the meeting, to where they're gonna ask what was the sanction.
yeah, and hopefully we're further along, with Jeremiah at
Yeah.
that point.
And have a little more
I
information.
mean, you're absolutely right in saying what you're saying, and we're right in saying what ours says, so I think it's a good point to be made both ways.
What about Article 4? Do we wanna have a similar thing there or no?
Yeah, we should.
Okay,
The only reason the finance committee usually just votes on money articles.
Okay.
And although it is a tangentially money article, it's really about, it's an operational question about what kind of truck can be purchased.
well, I support it.
Yeah, I support Article 4.
The select board supports approving this article 3-0.
Okay, and then on the warrant as a whole, I would move that we approve this warrant for calling a special town meeting.
Second.
And is there any further discussion or comment on the warrant? All right, we'll call a vote. Susan?
Yep.
Scott?
Yes.
And Justin, yes. Okay, we'll get 7 copies to sign.
One for your mother.
And that takes care of old business 1. Old business 2 is the anti-discrimination and harassment policy. So I made some edits and gave them to Sophia today. I think I laid out a more clear process for what happens. Basically, the way I laid it out, the human resources director or someone else if necessary does the investigation, sends it to the select board. They're required to do it within 2 weeks of receiving the complaint. Then the select board at that point takes that report and all relevant information and meets with, because we're required to meet with anyone who might be subject to discipline. And we decide whether or not the town is going to take disciplinary action. I think it just laid it out a little bit more clearly than it was laid out.
And I just for clarification, when we had that meeting, it would be with all parties?
No.
Or just the person, if we're taking an action?
It's just with, if you're discussing the discipline or charges or complaints against an employee, it's just with them.
So if HR,
Plaintiff.
right, if HR finds that there was no wrongdoing or that there's no reason for any punitive action, then what happens? We just,
So
it comes to us?
So the way that I laid it out, which I think is the right way to do it, is basically the select board's never beholden to any recommendations, right? And that's just how it is. The report could come back and say, this person did violate the policy egregiously and they should be terminated, or it could come back and say, this person didn't violate the policy at all and there should be no disciplinary action. We can take all the information and do what we want.
Right.
And that's just the fact, that's how it is.
Okay.
Whether or not,
But no, I
that's
agree.
just how it
Agreed.
is.
So
So the way that I have it written out is the report is sent to the select board, and then the select board at that point in time chooses if it wants to have any meetings with any alleged,
with anyone.
with anyone. And, I mean, that's how it is.
And then would that have to be an executive session?
We would offer an executive session, and this is why I'm gonna run it by Donna, but we
Right.
have to run it by Sophia first, because she wants to have more input, she wants to talk about it with us at the next meeting. I got a response from her that said, like, she wants to talk about it.
And I know she was concerned, because I had raised the question of there not being any timeline in there. And she raised a concern that, there could be problems with timelines, so I'm sure, and you may have talked to her about that as well.
I did not really, but you guys will all get a copy of my
Okay,
edits,
excellent,
and we'll have to discuss it with Sophia.
and then we'll.
But I just didn't like how I felt like it left it too much up to interpretation
Yep.
as to what was going on. So this is the warrant, so that would take care of two, we're really gonna discuss it with Sophia when she comes in
Okay.
next week, but we'll sign these copies of the warrant. Oh no, it's gotta be 2 pages.
Oh, wait.
Oh, did your signature, yeah, well,
What?
I can fix that if you want.
I mean, either way, we have to have Julio's signature, right?
I don't think, you really think you can get that on the page without making it
I don't know.
size 6
I
font or
could if
something?
you really want it, it's a
It doesn't matter
Doesn't
to me.
poor Scott.
You're doing a good job developing that signature, Dan.
Yeah.
Why do we have 3 each? Or however?
7.
7, okay, you told me before, it's for each posting site, never mind.
Yes, and I keep a couple like real copies here and one for the printer. Better to have too many than not enough.
Point taken.
This is the first warrant in years with 3 signatures on it. Since I've been on the board. It looks like that's 2 left.
I know. We need longer paper? Okay,
We'll finish
that's
that.
done. What's next?
I didn't give you copies of 3 because I've given them 2 each week, so I was trying to save a couple trees.
I don't blame you. I think I finally took it off my dock last week. That's fine, I'll find it, don't worry. I understood from Donna that she's out of town for the next 2 weeks, is that
Yes.
also your understanding?
Yeah, she's out of town until October 10th. We have a
Okay.
backup, Alex Rubin, who has been assigned in the interim. If we have any questions, I think she said she may be checking email, she's just not the person to go to with
That's fair.
immediate
my request.
So, item 3 is the town administrator job description contract and corresponding draft on it. So Melissa and I agreed to send a memo out to departments to clarify the role of the town administrator. And then we agreed to review the job description of the town administrator so that the select board is on the same page of what the role of the town administrator is before we inform everyone what the role of the town administrator is. And then Melissa raised to me that in her contract with the town, any changes to the job description need to be agreed upon by both parties, which includes the town administrator and the select board. So it's kind of a large task because it all needs to be agreed upon by both parties or none of it can happen. Which is a job description and a contract. The memo, could happen afterwards, and could happen before, but I thought it'd be better to clarify.
When is the contract up?
The contract is not up.
Year and a half, approximately.
Why are we doing contractual work then? If she's already under contract for the time being?
Because when we discussed changing the job description, Melissa mentioned that in the contract requires that changes to the job description be agreed upon by both parties, the town and the town administrator. So when I suggested some changes to the job description, Melissa suggested some changes to the contract.
To your knowledge, has Donna reviewed the contract?
No, I don't think Donna, at least she's never reviewed it for me.
And I figured you would have told us if you had asked her that, but trust but verify. I told Melissa, and I stand by this, I am not an expert in contracts. I would not feel comfortable addressing changes to the contract without our current town council reviewing the contract. Because I do not trust that I would find relevant issues. I don't have any experience and she has a lot. That's why we pay her.
And
Yeah, I'm with you on 100% on that.
so the general gist of it is I made some small changes to the job description, like grammatical ones, and a few significant ones in the A through S list of duties.
The version that I have, I believe, unless it's in email, is a PDF one that doesn't have your. That would be
You
great.
may wanna print off 2.
Yeah.
And then
I'll print off both of them.
I had suggested changing the human resources administration function, given the human resources director. And
Which makes a lot of sense to me, and I support that as well. Oh, wait, I do have one. Of course, I find it.
Well, I'll do that.
Sorry. So, yeah.
and a few other changes.
Just one second, where are you getting these things from?
The town administrator job description, I think. Correct?
Yes,
Um,
I'll print you up a copy, so
Okay.
unless you want me to email it, are you on there? and you
Yeah,
can
I'm
see
on
it?
here,
Okay,
I'm
I
just
will
curious if they were in email form.
so I
don't have
as
it.
I've said before, I think it's really mission critical that now that we have HR finally, HR be absolutely independent and answer to no one but the select board. That there can neither be the reality nor the appearance of any influence on HR's function. Given our history, I think it's super important. Would you concur?
yeah, I think the way we had it, one of my proposed changes was instead of the TA supervises the town's human resource administration, the TA coordinates with the human resources director for the maintenance and security of personnel files. And
Were you looking at under essential functions?
yeah, what is that?
My computer's like.
J,
I just have a sense, oh, under
it was
J.
old
J,
J.
right, blue, alright.
Oh, and then the TA administrators and supervisors either directly or through a person. So I don't know the best way to go about this, because it sounds like we want council to review the contract, we have the actual changes or recommended changes to the job description, we have the recommended changes to the contract, including extending it through February of 2024, and including changing 35 agreed upon office hours.
Is that in the are you talking the contract or the town, or the,
What's that?
It's just clarifying,
is the 35 agreed upon in the contract or in the
yes,
job description?
contract.
Yes, so this was something that came up before Scott was on the board, but Melissa and Sophia and I discussed if Melissa's put in 35 hours before Friday and took out Friday as a vacation time, can she take it off without vacation, because she's already done her 35 hours for the week? And my point of view is that it says no less than 35 agreed upon office hours per week is required by the contract. So I felt that if Melissa came earlier, stayed late on other days to accomplish the essential functions of the job, she hadn't maintained the agreed upon 35 office hours, and so that she was more than welcome to take the Friday off, but it would be vacation time and not comp time.
So it's not necessarily always a set Friday, it could be, coming in late on another day or something, or, and it's not, and I think I cleared it up in there saying that it had to be done within a certain, like it couldn't just be banked.
Yeah.
You know,
It just, how you put it is Ms. No may use comp time for any hours worked beyond the agreed upon 35 as per the employee handbook.
Which typically doesn't really apply to salaried supervisor employees, I don't think.
Well, that was my sense, which is that this is a contract with a salaried, what did you call it?
A salaried position,
Yeah,
supervisory
a salaried position.
roles.
So my sense was that what the town gets out of it is the town administrator fulfills the essential functions of the job, and in this case, for whatever reason, I mean, actually I know the reason, but the town was getting 35 agreed upon office hours. Because we all know why office hours are good, availability to the public, availability to departments, and that every employee has vacation and is entitled to use vacation. But that other than vacation or sick time, those office hours need to be covered. So it can't be, if a salary position, the person works late on a Monday, take Friday off.
And I think part of the difficulty I always have with these policies, and I actually, talked to a couple of town administrators in other towns, as well as the town manager in Barrington, is that, we end up making policies, I'm gonna call them the shoe bomb scenario, right? Sometimes policies are drafted to prevent bad action and then become restrictive even of people who are reasonable. But, so it's always tricky to draft a policy that isn't so restrictive that it causes problems for people who are legitimate, right? But I think that comp time is something that's for a salaried worker, having, been that person and worked a lot more than the 35 hours, say. I think it's not unreasonable to occasionally take comp time, but I don't think it can be a regular thing. So I don't know how to craft a policy, like I think your office hours thing is one way to approach it. And but I think it's tricky. I don't know how you do it, and I think in talking to the other town administrators, this was part of a consideration, they've handled it by having available comp time, but not being abusive about taking it. But I don't know how you craft a policy that does that. Like, you know, asking someone who's put in a 60-hour week for whatever reason not to take comp time, I mean, I guess you're right, they could take it as vacation time. But at some point, the number of hours adds up high enough that you feel like it's not unreasonable that they maybe not have office hours, but to do it every week, I think would be inappropriate. So I'm not sure, I totally respect what you're after, I just recognize the difficulty in crafting a policy that's like fair and equitable and protects the town and doesn't act, you know, overburden employees, like, you know, I don't know how you do it.
So how do we wanna proceed with this? The job description, the contract, and I think the memo kind of follows depending on how the job description and contract negotiations or process goes, because we could decide the job description is that X or Y, and the memo to employees will partially be based on that.
What, I didn't, other than the HR thing, what changes were being suggested that would affect the memo?
I don't, let me look back.
Cause that was the only one I noted on the memo, but you may have had others.
Yeah, I'm not familiar, I had just always thought that we should clarify between the town and the town administrator, the job description first.
I completely agree with you that it would be good to clarify it, I just don't know that the memo has to be linked to it, because the only thing that's in there that struck me that
The hour.
needed to change, that's not in the memo is about the TA's role in supervising various departments.
That's
But
what I
right.
agree with you, that the only difference
Well,
is our thing with the TA as far as those hours.
well, other than that, the current job description says the TA supervises the town's human resource administration.
Well, that's something that we gotta think about and make a change or not.
Yeah.
I was just sticking with the hours thing. You asked if there was other points that were gonna hold up the memo going
Yeah.
out, and it doesn't seem like there
The
are.
memo- yeah, the
Other
memo-
than that, the next
It's
statement.
the
that we just
HR
had.
thing, yeah, the HR thing is the only thing,
Right.
but if we took HR off the list of people that are answering to her, we could always amend it and send a separate memo just to HR, but as long as if we wanted the memo to go out sooner, I think it wouldn't be inappropriate to just remove HR from the chain and make it clear, I think I had given you, changes that make it clear that, pardon?
I can print it off for everybody.
Yeah.
Well, so this paragraph would change drastically depending on how we end up with the job description. Effective immediately, all day-to-day operational items, including human resources concerns, should be reported directly to the town administrator.
Right, and I did change that.
You're saying you should change that?
Well, I'm saying, if they're supposed to go to the human resources director,
Well, all day-to-day operations wouldn't go to the human resource director.
or would human resource concerns go to the town administrator or the human resources?
To HR.
To HR. So
That's not
human
how the memo
resources
has it.
concern would not be in there. Well, I don't know, what is, human resource concerns, would that concern, like, I need more labor? No, human resource concerns would go to HR. Yep, so that would have to
So
be.
maybe you should change to benefit concerns, cause that, I think is more what was,
Okay,
cause Sophia doesn't handle benefits,
okay,
payroll and benefit concerns.
And then the other thing that we need to clarify is that the select board appoints the town administrator, and anyone under that appointment chain, anyone's appointed by the select board, the town administrator is tasked with supervising, but
is this memo or job description, no.
memo of all appointed, right? Because elected, the
Elect-
tree,
we have no
the elected
control. Yeah,
tree
yeah.
warden doesn't report to the select board or the town administrator, or
Yep.
they just report to the voter. So, how do we wanna proceed? I don't wanna get too hung up on this if we need to have or we wanna have council review it anyways. I don't know where to begin with council. Are we going to have her look at the contract as it is, look at the contract as it's proposed?
Both.
Both.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
the original and
That's
the
the point,
proposed
right?
changes.
Look at
and-
this, make recommendations and fit our proposals into it.
Yes.
Draft up something that's.
That would work.
Yeah.
I mean, changing I'm okay with most of it, I think I looked over these at one point, and, the only question I had was this one about, but is not required. The TA attends regular meetings, but is not required, and attends all town meetings.
So the way I have it written is, except when the TA is on vacation time or sick time. I don't know, the track changes came out weird.
Yeah, it really did. Okay,
Just because I didn't think that, although the town
No, that makes
administrator is
sense.
allowed to attend any meeting
right,
that they want,
we could put
They're not
may
required.
attend, right, yeah, okay.
So I
The
will,
track
but
changes.
you think, I should probably have Donna review this, just because of her town, which means that it could be, she's not gonna be back till October 10th, but we'll come back to it at that point.
Okay. So the main change to the contract would concern the comp time issue.
The comp time and a possible extension.
Right.
Of,
The contract.
she definitely needs to look at it.
Yep.
And before anybody gets extensions,
Yeah.
you gotta keep, everything changes in there always.
Yeah.
2 years, something like that.
So we will table that until Don's had a chance to look at that. The next item is office coverage during vacation or makeup time after vacation. So, and it's come up in a few different ways, but I think the question is essentially, in each department, there's often office hours. And sometimes there's not office hours, but someone's in the office doing work. And when the person who would be holding office hours is on vacation or sick time, is there someone covering for them, or are they making up those hours after they come back from vacation or sick time?
It seems like there's two separate issues, right? To me, that's two separate issues. One is if there's work that needs to be done, right, and a person is out, whether it's vacation or for any other reason, how does the work get done? Does it just get delayed till they return? Does someone else cover those jobs while they're absent? Or does the person make up that work when they return? I'm inclined to say that, like, typically when you take vacation, when I take a vacation, typically you don't work double hours when you return to recover from the vacation. That can be an anti-vacation, I don't know. So I think vacation is vacation and you don't just make up the hours.
Well, one thing that Sophia and I talked about was in some instances, if we were to have someone, and I mean it is just so particular to each department,
I agree.
but if we were to have someone cover, some office hours, they may not be able to fulfill all of the functions of the person who's normally holding them, because maybe they're an assistant. So there may be things that just do need to get delayed, depending on what it is.
Which is fair, but then they get dealt with when the person comes back, but they don't necessarily work double hours the next week.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends, because maybe they do need to work, depending on what it is, more hours to make up for
That's what
whatever it
happens.
may be.
The onus is on that employee to get that work done.
And I think if they're gonna go over hours, they're gonna need to get permission, not only for the vacation, but to make up the hours.
I think they need to do it on their own time then. I mean, do it as much as you can, but, I mean, if I walk away from something and I come back 2 weeks later, I don't expect to still stay walked away from it. It's up to me to pick up those pieces and get that job done. And do the rest of the job that you're back at work for.
But
You
that
can
would
make
be,
that up. I don't think that's like, all of a sudden they're paying them extra because they took vacation and left work behind that couldn't be filled. And all of a sudden they come back and, oh, well, I need extra hours to do this. It's the job.
right?
You would have done it had you been here. Now you leave, which is fine, everybody's entitled to leaving, but you have to understand that when you leave, you come back, you still got a pile of papers in your desk. Those are your papers that need to get rectified and sent out and finished. If you've got somebody that's capable of handling it during the time you're there, and they are part of the budget process for assistant clerk, for instance, assistant building inspector, if there was somebody that's building, then that's part of their budget. And those people try to do as much of that work as possible, and the person who actually goes away feels like, yeah, I can walk away, knowing that when I come back, I don't have to make this up. But I think that's kind of how it is in the real world, is that you walk away from something, it's still yours when you come back to it.
And it's tricky, because if we actually have someone cover the office, but they can't the functions of the job, then we've paid someone who wasn't able to get the work necessarily done. I mean, it just varies office by office.
I guess it would also depend on the, not like, if if you can do 80% of the job, then when the person comes back, there's only 20%.
Yeah.
If you can do 5% of the job, why are we paying you at all?
Correct.
Okay.
I mean, I think it had worked. It had always seemed like it had been working in past years. Goes away, somebody fills in as best they can. They come back, maybe the two of them, because it's still in their budget
Right.
to have that person help. I mean, to me, the clerk's office is a perfect example, only because it is to work together. They do have an assistant. So that's the only reason I'm using the clerk as
And
an
I know
office.
that we do have an assistant building inspector that when
Well, it's
Don
budgeted
can't be here,
for.
it's budgeted for, and when Don can't be here,
Right.
that person does cover for it.
Sure, and when they
And there might
come
be
back,
some bookkeeping that, or not bookkeeping, but
they
paperwork
work
that isn't
together,
covered, then when he comes back,
going over what they
Right.
had, what was going on.
Except my understanding, and I could be wrong, you need to ask Don himself, but my understanding was that the alternate building inspector was more so for, if he had a conflict of interest, they'd do an inspection, right?
right,
They wouldn't do the things that Don does that are not the inspections, running the office, managing.
Right.
So
the
when
department.
Owen was here, he did.
He did do that.
Unfortunately, Owen passed away and Don's not replaced him yet, but Owen held office hours once a week when Don couldn't, he came in as well.
Because generally, these guys aren't, just a carpenter. These guys are building inspectors or commissioners in other towns. So they're used to the same software from town to town to town. It's permanentized, just using that office as a base. So he's got that money in the budget. No harm, no foul. You expect Don to take a week off and to have that guy come in during that week during the year. So, like you said, if they're only being able to fulfill 5% of it, then we need to rethink that budget time and say, you gotta get a better backup or no backup.
Well, and one thing that I talked about with Sophia was that we may be paying an alternate or an assistant a certain amount, and if they're expected to cover the office, now we're gonna pay them maybe the same amount as the person who would normally be filling that role, but closer to it. So they may work for $20 an hour, but they may get bumped to $25 an hour when they're covering the office. It seemed like.
and if that's coming out of the town clerk's salary line, because they're acting town clerk at that moment, and acting town clerk, I didn't have a better title for it. But, you know,
C'est la vie.
assistant, some of the time an acting
Yeah.
town clerk, when you're acting town clerk, you get acting town clerk salary, and it comes out of the town clerk salary line. But that way, we're not paying double hours, right? That means that person is fulfilling those roles during those hours.
Right.
And that, therefore, all of that work will not be on the clerk when she returns.
Still on the clerk's shoulders.
Right, but some of it's been done.
Correct.
She might have to check that it's been done.
Well, but one thing Sophia said is it's not rare. I understand every employee has certain expectations of what they're able to do, but it's not rare that the department head is able to do things that someone working under them can't necessarily do.
That's absolutely true, but it's usually not, like, if they have an assistant, it's usually not a huge portion of the job. There's only some things, right? And the assistant takes the other things off your plate. So if you come back and you've got 20% of the job that you have to make up, you can probably make it up in the hours you've got. If you've got the whole job, you can't. I completely see your
Yeah.
point, I just think that like, well, I don't feel like working that day, I'm taking a vacation, so I'll make up those another day. I'm not sure that that's really, that
Well,
you get to make up those hours, it's a vacation, you're on vacation, we paid you for the vacation, we're not gonna pay for vacation and extra.
except that I don't think,
Oh, that's right, salaried, it's part-time employees don't get vacation pay, forgive me, you're right.
which is something that
Well, who else is
you all
salaried?
are working on. But
Who else is salaried?
salary, it's a town
Director of
administrator, the
operations.
police chief, the director of operations.
It also contracted except for the director. Right, chief of police is under contract.
Yeah.
TA is under contract, that's salary. Jim's salary, you can almost say everybody's salary because it's set in stone at the town meeting.
You could, but the salary carries in other meanings, so.
I-
But they're all
no,
full-time employees, which
Yeah.
now we're talking about part-time employees, and I was wrong when I said that, I apologize.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. They do, cause they don't get paid if they don't work.
We don't have too many of those in a position that's running an office. Nobody here is running an office.
I think it would only be the building inspector and clerk. Well, I mean, I don't know, the
That have
library director,
part-time. Tax collector, treasurer,
great,
The treasurer is contracted, it's a
Right.
firm.
that's what
great,
I'm saying, so that's out of our hands now.
and actually, is the tax collector,
She's elected, so she
Elected.
gets a salary.
right, elected,
So there's two offices basically. That we have this potential concern, which maybe the assessors.
No, they're
Assessor
elected.
elected, and,
Yeah.
I mean, basically,
Right.
you know, they have an assistant in there, so.
I think that, isn't that how it's set up right now, where it's just, you've got, when did that change? Because
tell me what changed.
this policy, it seems like it should be what it was when we left, that if you are exactly what we said, if you go on vacation, you've got a line item for your help, it comes out of your pay. That was what it was then. Did it change somehow?
The official policy did not change, no. But board members were allowing certain departments to make up time. So I just wanted to clarify, because we do have a department that is asking for time off and to make up time, and, you know, I feel as the town administrator and that person's direct report, that they have a support staff that at the very least can cover the hours or part of the hours to be open and answer questions and answer voicemails and emails and.
So
Like you
with that,
said, you know,
you know,
60% of the job, or what, filing, you know, dog licenses and.
Except that, since we're getting particular here, the town clerk assistant, or the town clerk staff, has told me that he is not willing to keep the office open at the wage that he's being paid. And
Well,
if he's gonna do more work, he wants more pay.
I think that's fine.
Right, everybody agreed to that.
I
So
don't think I agree with you.
what amount of pay?
Well, whatever's to measure it with that type of position. You know, we can look that up, easy enough, we look at everybody's pay, town to town to town, figure
What's
out what
his
that
current
is.
rate of pay?
Minimum wage.
15.50.
Right, so I would say even somewhere between 20 and 25 an hour would seem reasonable. What's the clerk pay an hour?
She's paid 25 something, I would say 20 if
So
she's not
20.
capable of.
Right,
doing
if you
everything.
can't fulfill all the duties of the clerk, 20 seems reasonable.
Yeah, and it just comes out of the line item.
And I mean, I
of
think
the
it's fair
salary.
that he shouldn't get minimum wage for acting as an assistant clerk.
No, I
That seems
agree.
reasonable.
I agree.
And then the other thing would just be availability.
Right.
Because someone may have a 6-hour-a-week job and they can put 6 hours a week into it, and now you say your supervisor's gone, can you do 16 hours?
No, I think they do
Whatever.
They may well
whatever
say-
they can.
Right.
Yeah,
And whatever is left on the table when they get back, it's up to that office head to coordinate with their assistant to get the work done over the next course of week or two, and this guy gets paid back at his normal salary then, and everything still comes out of the line item.
And since we're talking about that one particular position, that particular staff member has been here for the whole shifts at the same time as the clerk the last couple of weeks, so I wouldn't see why availability would be an issue.
Also,
I don't know.
Unless he's
I
going
just-
on
I'm
vacation at the
just-
same time, and that's.
I'm just not going to assume. You
right,
can't
Right,
assume.
no,
No,
I'm
no.
just saying, he has been here for the.
and you never know, like 3 months from now, he might not be available, maybe
Yeah.
he'll be on vacation, who knows, but you,
Yeah.
you do the best you can. And perhaps it would be ideal if they didn't take vacation at the same time, if that's
Well,
possible.
that would certainly be a request
Right.
that we put in.
But also, do you remember when we agreed to the new hours and I raised the issue of, is the assistant gonna be there the whole day?
Mhm.
And you're like, no, she's not saying she's going to use him more hours, but I believe she did last week.
Yes, instead of 14 hours for the pay period, it was 16.5.
That's only an extra 2, but what's happening this week? What's
This
his job
week,
to?
He was here the whole shift on Wednesday, which is how many hours? And today he was here for most of the shift, I think he left at 5.
And what's the maximum?
Well, that's
amount of work?
later on the agenda, right?
Yeah.
Right, yes.
But
Yeah.
I don't think that wasn't the understanding that I had from the proposal.
The letter
And-
said that because Sophia was here, the staff didn't need to be here.
Wait,
Why
what
don't
was
we,
it, what
let's
was
just
it?
hear, communication, let's communicate directly with the people we
Okay.
want to talk to.
Sounds like a plan. Hello.
Hi, Steve,
I'm just stopping it.
we're about to enter executive session in a couple minutes.
That's all right, I like executives.
Okay,
We just
So
signed
where-
the
so
special
where do
town
we-
meeting warrant.
where does that bring us to? So we're discussing whether the vacation policy, do we wanna close that discussion and open? We can't, she's not here yet.
Can we finalize that discussion?
I would like to finalize it. Where
Well,
does it stand?
what's the motion?
Do you want me to motion?
I may wanna write one down.
Because I think that there's too many questions left unanswered. What is the rate of pay, other than we vaguely come up with some number in between the two
Alright,
current
so
rates of pay?
let's do the diligence and find out what the rate of pay is in surrounding towns.
Mhm.
So at least we have a basis as to what we pay, put that
For an
number on.
for an assistant.
What
Yes.
happens when, someone holding office hours goes on vacation?
Sure.
And then you say to the assistant, can you cover? And they say, no, I can't.
Then the office is closed.
So that would be
Yeah, I mean,
the question.
I think that's just has to be the way it is.
And you never, like, if we didn't have an assistant, then the office would just be closed.
It would be normally true. So those questions get answered by whom?
I can give you the rate, and when you go into executive session, I'll pull up my survey of
Okay.
other towns and tell you what the rate is.
What else would we need to make a decision about that besides the rate of pay?
Well, I think it would make sense if it's just about one person in one office to speak with that one person from the one office. I think that's only right. I mean, if it's gonna be a general
It's
policy.
not, it's a general policy I'm asking you to make, but you happen to have a vacation request for next week.
What has Don Tirico done when he's on vacation
So he has an alternate that is,
that fills in?
right, that's called, if it's a, a length of time.
Right.
If you just offer a day, no.
Right.
But we don't have an alternate building inspector right now.
He has alternate inspectors, yes, that go out and make inspections. He doesn't have someone that's currently coming in and doing the office. But it's my understanding from Don that they do check the voicemails, and he may check the emails and get in touch with the inspector. So they are doing work. But I can get all that information for you.
And that's paid out of Don's salary,
No, he has
has-
an alternate, so.
and that's a line item.
Yes.
Okay, so it is 6 P.M. according to that computer.
Choose that one.
We have lists on the agenda, 6 P.M. executive session to discuss potential discipline or dismissal of or complaints against the town clerk, purpose 1. I'd entertain a motion to enter executive session for that purpose. Is there a motion?
You just motioned.
So he was reading. Shoot, I will motion. Do you need to read it? I will motion to enter executive session for reason 1, dismissal of or complaints or charges against a public officer, employee, staff member, or individual.
And please add your motion whether or not we're gonna return to open session.
And we will be returning to open session afterwards.
I'll second the motion. Is there any discussion or comment on the motion to enter executive session?
I will actually make one comment, which was that I was going to propose, I would like to propose that the 4 items that were on the letter delivered to Ms. Walker last Friday be, how would I like to phrase that? Are put into the official record, and these other issues that have arisen regarding the clerk be forwarded to the HR director to review with Terry and put into her personnel file should that be necessary. So that we don't have to address them today in executive session, but more importantly, I think it will not only allow the select board to deal with other matters, but to take better advantage of having an HR director.
So are you saying
I
that
was,
you don't want to enter executive session?
I was allowing the board to weigh in on their opinion as to whether we should proceed with what I just suggested or go ahead into executive session. I will also say that I think that it is important that we draft a memo regarding last week. We came up with a policy about this a number ago regarding what happened last week, to be a permanent written record of what happened. And I don't know whether we need to do that in executive session or not. So that would be another issue to consider.
Yeah, so my sense was that if there's going to, or my understanding is that usually if you enter executive session for purpose 1, you're discussing charges or complaints against an employee, discipline or dismissal of an employee, and that those actions would take place in that executive session. The releasing of the public portion of it, in my view, comes when you review the minutes and determine whether or not they're appropriate to release to the public. So I do think executive session material, I mean, there's a reason we call executive sessions, should happen in executive session. At a later point, if the matter is closed, as the advice that we got says, when the matter is closed, the minutes may be released or a redacted version of the minutes may be released.
I wasn't talking about minutes though.
Yeah.
I was specifically talking about the drafting of a memo
Yes, so
per the policy we passed a while back.
to speak generally, I would think that if you're discussing disciplinary items then you're probably going to write a disciplinary memo, in which case that would happen in executive session.
Okay, then I think we need to call executive session. Then I will
Okay.
re-entertain, because I think that it's important. We passed a policy a number of months ago that when we had an important meeting with anyone, an employee or any other, there would be written documentation regarding the outcome of that meeting, or what we understood to have taken place. Something separate from minutes, but in the case of an employee, it would go in their employee file, their personnel record. In the case of a meeting with anybody, a contractor or whoever, it would be us drafting a letter saying, here's what we understand to have happened. Separate from the minutes that the person would receive, because sometimes people walk away from a meeting with different views of what occurred. And I think in this case, when we're dealing with an employee, it's very important for there to be a written record, because many times in the past, and this is quite separate from this individual case, there have been select boards that have talked about something with an employee, and then that doesn't happen, and then the employee has come forth and said, well, there was nothing in my personnel, because nothing ever got drafted and put in the personnel file. It's like it never happened, because nobody goes back and reads through the minutes
And
to
thanks
see
for that.
what that was. So I think it's an appropriate policy. My only question for you is if you feel we need to draft that in executive session, then I think since it concerns what happened at last week's executive session, it would need to be an executive session. So let's have another executive session.
Yeah, so that would be, just to speak briefly to that, I would think that, anything any letter that's, or anything that's disciplinary in nature, we offer executive session
Okay.
to employees. That's my understanding.
Which is fine, so then we should do
If
that.
there was no discipline, there was no.
I would agree, it's
No
not,
discipline.
there's no discipline, but we did have things that we thought needed to be remediated. I wouldn't call it discipline, I would call it remediation. We noted several
That's fine,
things
that's fine.
we wanted improved, we wanted paid attention to, we wanted delivered by a certain date. I don't think it is discipline,
Well, here's,
but if
okay,
you would be more comfortable doing it in executive session, I'm okay with it.
no, so you're on to something, you're right, in the sense that if we are discussing job performance and we are not discussing discipline or dismissal, and we're just discussing job performance and we're not disciplining or dismissal, we're just talking items of business,
Right,
then we are not, it's not that we shouldn't go into executive session, we're not legally allowed to.
okay, then, so we.
Okay, so can I grasp my head around what's going on here? So you made a motion,
To enter executive session.
But I wanted to discuss it, I did,
and then you made another motion that.
No, it wasn't a
perhaps-
motion.
it wasn't a motion,
But.
I was discussing
Okay,
whether we
Seemed like-
should enter.
and then if we were to give the information to HR and let them run with it, which is what they should be doing, then we would need to go into executive session tonight.
Correct, because if we were that we
Yeah,
would be
yeah.
able to, outside of executive session,
So, but
discuss
I
remediation measures.
I think that in order to craft that document, regardless of whether it's
Disciplinary.
disciplinary in its nature or not, the facts that are coming out of it came from within
Exactly.
closed session. And that until that session has been made public,
Mhm.
that document that we want to create for the personnel file in the HR needs to be formed in executive session.
Point.
Yeah, if
I
they're
believe
charged,
so.
if they're charges.
It's not even if they're charges, it's just we're talking about,
Because the
it's a
content,
continuation of
Yep.
the meeting in a way. And we're finalizing what was said and how we wanted to go forward with communications, et cetera, but it was done under executive session. I think that if we're gonna bring up basically what was said and draft a memo that's gonna go into someone's personnel file, then that's private piece of paper that needs to be formed in private until those minutes are released.
essentially, that it would need to be an executive session, because if you don't do an executive session, content of last week's executive session meeting would be revealed.
Well, because here's why, because of the same reason you enter executive session purpose one in the first place, which is to discuss charges or complaints, discipline or dismissal,
Right.
right? Just because you discuss charges and complaints, discipline or dismissal, doesn't mean that you find that the charges or complaints are valid or that you issue
Correct.
discipline or dismissal.
Correct.
But to discuss even the idea of charges or complaints, discipline or dismissal, we enter into executive session. That's why you go into executive session. It doesn't mean that you are then obliged to take disciplinary action.
Correct.
Right,
To the extent that we are not entering executive session to discuss charges or complaints, discipline or dismissal, we shouldn't enter executive session. But my sense was that we were discussing charges, complaints, discipline or dismissal.
but then it seems that Sue has, to me, the right track. Not to go there, but to let our HR director do the job that they're hired for.
Then we can't, if we're not going into executive session to discuss charges, complaints, discipline, dismissal, we can't go in.
I agree,
I'll vote no.
it's one of those two, but I think that if we're going in to create the document that was created in executive session, it's getting up to
I know.
freaky here, then we need to do it in executive session, or we have to not create that draft out in public.
Can I make a suggestion?
Sure.
I actually drafted something for us so that we wouldn't have to start de novo, right? It's the second page of the 6 PM thing. Why don't you look through that and then maybe, once we see what's in there, it will help us to make a decision about whether we need to enter or not.
This page 2, right after.
Yeah, it starts memo of understanding.
My only concern is we've been previously advised by council that if we deliberate on confidential documents in open meeting, they can lose their confidentiality.
Ah,
Well, that's true, right now.
All right.
Because it's
Point
sitting on our
taken.
table, it is an open.
Well, as long as we're not deliberating
as long
on
as
it,
we're not
reviewing it, but, so this is the question, I think we should really come to the conclusion and then vote on whether we wanna enter executive session. Do we want to discuss charges or complaints, discipline or dismissal? Not necessarily take discipline, but do we want to discuss matters that are in the area of charges, complaints, discipline or dismissal? Because if we're going to, we should enter executive session, and if we're not legally allowed to enter executive session.
Oh, I understand. Does Ms. Walker have the right to be asked what her request is prior to us making the decision?
Well, we,
Or who makes the
the
first move?
employee, so we would go into executive session if we agree that's what we wanna do.
Correct.
At that point, the employee has the right to have the
It's
matter
at
be heard
that
in
point,
open
it's not
session.
prior to us going in.
Well, we could be notified in advance, but we could also be notified, I believe, when we enter executive session. That the employee desires that the matter be heard in open meeting.
But that's something that you don't ask prior to us us coming to our agreement as to yes or no.
Well, the notice does say, please contact me if you would like to elect for the hearing to be held in open session. I would just re-clarify once we enter executive session.
Okay,
all right, if we
Alright.
enter executive session,
so you're good with that? You understand all of that?
if we enter executive session for the purposes of drafting the memo, can we exit the executive session having decided upon due deliberation that we should do so because it isn't covered by the rule? Like, I don't
So,
understand how
no,
we
so-
can't deliberate before and we can't discuss the content thereof in an open meeting.
So here,
We're
exactly, but
stuck in a,
But
you know,
we enter
yes, sir.
executive session to discuss discipline or dismissal. Who knows, because of the open meeting law, whether or not, what direction, because we can't deliberate unless at meeting. No one knows, when you're one of three, no one ever knows how something's gonna go. But if we sense that the discussion pertains to charges or complaints, discipline or dismissal, we should enter executive session.
So I'm gonna call it remediation because I don't think it's discipline or dismissal. I don't think without revealing what happened last week, it didn't seem to me that anything rose to discipline or dismissal, but we did duly note things that were not working well, and I wanted to document what we thought about that and how we thought it should be remediated
Okay,
to
I would,
improve performance going forward. Is that,
unless
that's
anyone has
job
a
performance?
profound thought, I'll relay this, I think we should call a vote
Okay,
now, as to whether or not we're entering executive session, because I think it's been made clear. I think the standards for entering executive session, we've flushed out
so
thoroughly.
how would you vote?
I was gonna call the vote, but I would vote, I would vote yes, because I think that sometimes you discuss charges or complaints, discipline or dismissal, and that's the process you go through. Just because something doesn't result in discipline or dismissal doesn't mean you don't consider it.
Okay,
So I would vote yes to enter executive session.
I'll vote yes.
I agree.
Okay.
That's three.
So the vote Susan, Scott, and Justin all voted yes to enter executive session. So at this point, there's no one else in the room, but we will close the door and close the,
Online
meeting.
access.